we're still talking about inclusivity. And really, there is nothing to receive except the I am, nothing to meet out there in the world except that which some of us call God. Some of us use other names. I don't care if you call it potato. Truly, it is, and it is the all in all. So, as we talk about inclusivity, one of the things that comes up as a fear for some people is that we say that we are open at the top. So we're willing to listen to and experiment with whatever philosophy happens to come our way. One of the challenges we've had is not losing who we are in the midst of all this exploration. And so there's a strong feeling within our movement that, or as Reverend Dr. Alice Bandy would have said, we're open at the top but not the bottom. We're not everything is just going to fall out and get left behind. This is a container that is big enough for all faith philosophies. And so it's important every so often to look back on who we really are and get clear about that. It's very much a part of what we do individually. And right now, it's especially obvious that we're doing that as a larger organization, as a worldwide community. So I was going to talk a little bit about the history of science of mind, very little bit, because what I found was it's mostly dead old Greek guy dudes. And while they are fascinating in their own right, we didn't hear from anything except white males until the middle of the 1800s, when women started showing up and having voices just out of nowhere. I'm willing to bet that they were there all along. And I'm willing to bet that they had a huge part in how we all came to be. As a matter of fact, I know this because one of the great philosophers that our founder, Ernest Holmes, would talk about was Thomas Troward. And the book of Thomas Troward's that we read is the Edinburgh Lectures. Now, I'm not sure why we chose the Edinburgh and Duray lectures, but the thing about Thomas Troward was that he was a bit of a prankster. He and his family were forever cracking jokes with each other. And at one point, it must have slipped into the way he was talking in front of the London Metaphysical, or the English Metaphysical Society, because one of the ladies in, one of the ladies in charge kind of gave him stink eye for that. And all of a sudden, he was like this little kid who had gotten his hand slapped. And the Edinburgh Lectures were very serious and very all about principle. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. And so we read his only unfunny book for some reason. The truth is that if you get into this philosophy, you're going to find a ton of things to laugh about. We human beings are hysterical. We're just a little bit nuts. And that might be one of the best things about us. So in the second half of the 19th century, we started hearing more from the ladies in the group. You've heard me quote Emma Curtis Hopkins a lot when I want to get into more of a biblically based, metaphysical practicality. She has a book called Practical Mysticism that is just one of the best things I've ever read for dropping down into whatever that thing is we call it that is beyond words. If you look at our kissing cousins, philosophically speaking, the Unity group, their textbook, one of their major textbooks, is called Lessons in Truth, and that was written by H. Emily Cady. So she got her voice into it. Ernest Holmes himself was ordained in a tradition called divine science. Back in the day, these were all very fluid things, unity and divine science and religious science and a whole bunch of other stuff. We're all kind of under the umbrella of New Thought, and we're all quoting each other all over the place. They were all going to each other's services. Ernest Holmes was given his ordination in divine science, and that was actually founded in San Francisco by Melinda Kramer and in Colorado by the Brooks sisters, specifically Nona and Althea, and I believe there was a third one. But they decided to work together. And so they had this rather large group going. As a matter of fact, you can still see Nona Brooks's church that she worked at in Pueblo, Colorado. It's still there, now being led by a minister trained by science in the Centers for Spiritual Living. There's so much crossover. It's just really one big family. But we have a better balance now of the masculine and the feminine that started about 150 years ago. What we're doing now is bringing in more non-European voices, not Europe or European American centric, not just Greek philosophers, but people from around the world and the traditions from around the world that are so powerful. Dr. Raymond Anderson wrote something in the Science of Mind magazine recently that I want to share with you. He wrote, if we want to include people, we have to know who we are as a movement. We have to know who we are with such audacity that we refute other labels and stand in who we are. And so this is what Michael Gott would call the dynamic tension. The ability to stand in who we are and be open to other voices that may have been speaking all along, but that we had not given proper conscious attention to. There's a practitioner out there named Tracy Brown. She has a website and a group on Facebook called What is Mine to Do, or Mine to Do. And she has a huge following. She is a religious science practitioner. It is my hope that she will be speaking to you guys through our platform in the spring. She actually also wrote a little pamphlet about the African American women and men who helped found Science of Mind the way we do it. And Science of Mind and New Thought across the country. She talks about Johnny Coleman, who founded her own huge branch of New Thought. There's a lot going on in racial equality that was never put into the history books. Ernest Holmes was very kind of quiet about how he made sure voices would be heard. I have in the past quoted him from when he was dedicating a church, and Dr. Holmes said something to the effect of, now, this is an integrated church, which is like finding a unicorn, guys. Even today, finding a non-segregated church in America, that's the last place that segregation is still working. So coming together, Ernest Holmes said, I have heard some of you say that, it's a non-segregated church and that might not be okay. But we go back to principle and remember our oneness, that God shows up in many, many different faces and voices and different ways of being in the world. And so we will not be segregating our churches. As a matter of fact, at one point, the Science of Mind magazine, just one time, actually put white churches first and then a little section called colored churches. He did away with that very, very quickly. We are one. And one of the wonderful things going on in this country right now is that more and more voices with more and more accents are being heard. I think it's fabulous. Can you imagine the potlucks we're going to be having in 20 years because we decided to be inclusive? It's going to be, kale salad right next to the donuts and everything in between. Yes, I think in food. I spent a large chunk of this week doing something a little bit different. I don't remember doing a full-on convention from a dining room chair in the past. But Dr. Ken Gordon, the last time he was with us, told me that for his money, the Convention of the Americas, la Convención de las Américas, was the best convention we do. And so I had it all set in my head that I was going to Chapala, to Ajijic in Mexico, and I was going to be at that convention, and I was going to stumble around with my horrible gringo Spanish, and I was going to do whatever it took to be part of that energy. these beautiful Latinos that are now graduating ministers and that have study groups and prayer groups and practitioners all across South America and in Spain, and actually up and down in the Americas, not just the United States, but we had people from Canada, we had people all the way down from Peru, from Colombia, from Mexico, claro, and they got together and they spoke truth. And it didn't matter whether I turned on the simultaneous translation or not. I was hearing science of mind. It was clear, it was powerful, and I have such respect for people who are willing to say, you know, this is not what we were expecting, but we're going to give it a shot. We're going to figure out Zoom. I think Dr. David Bruner will tell you they will never allow him to have control over the unmute all button again, ever. But, you know, we come into this world and we have to be willing to do some things badly in order to find out what does work for us, right? I really wish I could teach a class on how to make really awesome mistakes. I think that'll be the next curriculum I write. But what I got out of this session was I heard how the Mayan influence and science of mind fit beautifully together. I heard how visioning, which is one of our spiritual practices, sounds in Spanish. And so the questions are slightly different, and I got a fuller experience of it. And that was utterly beautiful. And I was reminded of a Mark Twain quotation, and excuse me, but I can't see my screen, where he wrote, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts." He goes on to say, "Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." And so what he's saying is that whether we do it physically or in consciousness, we need to step out of what we have always known. Now, I like to say there's going to be some adrenaline involved in this. That can show up as either fear or excitement. I know the first time I tried to travel internationally, I was scared. And I only went to countries that already spoke English, theoretically. I went to Scotland, and I'm pretty sure that was English, but I'm not sure. Actually, we were in the Highlands, so we probably shouldn't call it English. Okay, let the class on how to get lost and make mistakes begin now. So we have to get out of our little comfort bubble. We have to be willing to do things in front of other people and possibly do them badly the first couple times and see how other people do things in other ways. I have this wonderful once-a-month conversation with our youth and family co-directors, Diane and Aaron, Dr. Aaron Smith and Diane Gazelle, who is one of our practitioners, work together beautifully and are forever bouncing ideas off each other and trying new things. Now, not everything we are trying online is working right now. We have an amazing kids program. They're figuring out how to do it all on Zoom and read books that they can show on the screen to kids. They are really working hard to create a wonderful experience, and we haven't figured it all out yet. Or I should say they haven't figured it all out yet. My job is to just stand in awe of the work they do. We haven't figured out how to let the kids know that it's going on and bring them into the room. If you have kids and you're listening to this, please, please, please go to our Facebook page and sign up with the Youth and Family Group. These women do amazing work. There's a few male volunteers as well, so I should say these people do amazing work. And having to do it in a world that looks so very different can be a challenge. But who we are is a group of people who are willing to just give it a shot. I learned long ago that working with people meant I needed to leave my ego and probably my dignity outside the door in order to make things happen and make things work. If you're on Facebook, you'll see that I posted some pictures of the building as things around our center are being torn up and rebuilt. And it occurred to me that I created a beautiful metaphor for this balance I've been talking about today, this sense of everything is different and yet we're still who we are. I took all those pictures mostly from angles you've never seen before, because either it was fenced off and part of somebody else's property, or it's a road, the extension of Haas Boulevard, that didn't exist when we shut down the center's building. And so I was taking all of these pictures, and you could probably figure out where the building was if you looked closely. But I'm sure it was pretty disconcerting for some people because it looked like a different world with just a few little bits and pieces that were similar, or you could kind of recognize as the same. I would suggest to you that this is what we do. This is who we are as religious scientists. The biggest error thought, or what people in mainstream religions might call sin, the biggest error thought we have is that we are separate from God, that we're these little beings who are only on this one level of existence, that only exist in the physical world, that we're actually mostly just our bodies and maybe our thoughts, that we're limited by what our physical bodies and our physical brains can do. That is what we would equate to original sin, is this belief in separation. If we say God is all there is, then we must be part of that, because there's nowhere else to be and nothing else to be. And so as religious scientists, I almost feel like there should be a little, that little teeny tiny writing, or the guy speaking very fast to get all the legalese out of the way. What we do is just start where we are with whatever belief systems we have, and try and go back into our minds and into our thinking and into our consciousness and pick out those things that our soul, our divine center, recognize as actual truth. That love is the truth between all souls. And it can feel like we're wandering around in a foreign country sometimes. But in the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes wrote, "The way to proceed is to begin right where we are. It is not scientific to attempt to begin somewhere else." Obviously, no one told Ernest Holmes he had to be serious all the time. But let me read that again. The way to proceed is to begin right where we are. It's not scientific to attempt to begin somewhere else. So we proceed, that's an important word. Begin is another important word. You have to take that first step, and I strongly suggest doing it before you're ready. I've been learning all about how to do good videos, and one of the best pieces of advice I heard out there was, don't wait till you're ready, just start. I would suggest to you it's the same thing in consciousness. Now, if you don't know what to do, again, Dr. Holmes was very clear about how to start. He wrote, again in the textbook, one of the first things to do is to love everybody. One of the first things to do is to love everybody. If you have not done this, begin to do so at once. There is always more good than bad in people, and seeing the good tends to bring it forth. I would like to point out that he says, love everybody. And I'll ask you after we close today to go look in the mirror and see where you have not been able to love and include all the parts of yourself. Maybe the parts that mess up, maybe the parts that are having a rough day because dealing with the computer is just the last thing you want to do. You're just so done with it. We're all having those days off camera. Just because, things come together and Clay makes us look really good on Sunday mornings, just because the closed captioning made me say something more intelligent and wise than I had intended to say. It kind of fixed me, whatever I said. Just because we make it look good on camera doesn't mean I didn't have to reboot my little computer twice this morning in order to make it willing to come to church. I feel like my teenager is a computer and there's no way it's getting out of bed in order to come to service, even though I'm the one doing the talk. So I would ask you to take Dr. Holmes's advice to start. Just begin. Wherever you are, begin. And begin by loving everybody, including yourself. Know who you are, so that when you go out into the world, you don't need anybody else to try and tell you, and you don't need them to look just like you so that you feel safe. Yeah. And so part of who we are is a group of people who believe in prayer. Holmes also said that there was no other group that believed in prayer so much as us. We have a specific kind of prayer that we do, and we call it spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer. And so I ask you, if you've never experienced this before, just close your eyes and let it carry you. Take the parts that work for you. If I say something that you think is silly, ignore it and let it go. That part was not for you. And so if you'd like to get comfortable in your chair or close your eyes or whatever it takes to become fully present to all that you are, to all that is, I invite you to do that now. There is a single power and presence in the universe, besides which there is no other. That power and presence is the energy of life itself, that we experience as love, that we experience at the physical level as peace and wholeness and good. Some people call it God. If you don't like the word God, Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us to add an O and just call it the good. It is this being, this perfect divine energy that is fully present in, through, and as all of us, all beings everywhere. It is this energy that is the light and the life that is this universe. And so I speak my word on behalf of all of us, on behalf of everyone, everywhere, and every when. And what I absolutely know is that God is all there is, and we are part of that. And as Godded beings, as people who share in the Christ consciousness, who share a Buddha nature, as these beings, we stand fully in the light. And everything that we took as big scary shadows simply disappear back into the nothingness from which they came. All of that old belief in original sin, the belief that we're separate from the divine or ever could be, I just release and let go right now. And I stand in truth, allowing it to sink into every cell and awaken within every part of me, such that I know that there is one mind, a divine mind, guiding every single cell in this physical body, guiding and being the intelligence and the life in every cell of every body on the planet. As we are made up of God's stuff and made in the image and likeness of God, we are absolutely heirs to the kingdom of God. And so we inherit wholeness, which at the physical level looks like perfect health. I now know and claim that that is the truth of our being, and this thing we're calling COVID is nowhere near as big or all-encompassing as the divine being. It needs to just go away now because it's not real. It can simply poof back into the nothingness from which it came. And in this moment, I know that there is a great upwelling of compassion and power and peace amongst all beings as we take care of each other, as we recognize the Christ in each other's faces, as we begin now to see ourselves for who and what we all really are. I am so grateful for the magnificence of these souls. I am so grateful for the magnificence of spirit as a whole and in all its individuated examples. With a grateful heart, I just let this truth remain on center stage and be brought into form according to the law of cause and effect, not by me, but through me. I let the Spirit do all the work, and just let it be with gratitude and a grateful heart. I call it all good and very good, and if this has resonated with you, say with me now, and so it is.